So, the 80s died a little more this past month. Soon all the pastels will fade to gray and the sound of hairspray will be heard no more. Hulk's passing reminded me of this little oddball movie that was buried unseen in my 3D collection, Little Hercules. So often obscure German releases of B-movies shamelessly slap on the 3D label to rip off eager collectors like myself. Perhaps I just assumed as much and never thought to actually open this up and watch it. Surprisingly, I discovered this was a genuine, natively shot 3D movie released at the very dawn of the modern stereo resurgence back in 2009. The 3D Blu-ray only ever got released in Germany, likely because the movie predated the introduction of home 3D players, and the movie it became obscure on release. It's not entirely in 3D. If I were to estimate generously, I'd say that a little less than half the movie is in stereo, with the rest shown flat but pushed in the screen. This was not without precedent. There were a few films in the early 2000s, such as Spy Kids, Superman Returns, the sixth Harry Potter movie, that only featured select moments in 3D. I think what sets this one apart is I didn't really pick up on any rhyme or reason for the shifts to stereo. It does not follow any particular story point or character arc. My best guess is they started to film in 3D and realized, this was expensive. How much do we really need to sell it as a 3D movie? Now, they do make some effort to throw things at the screen. There's a sequence of the little Herc showing off his athletic abilities that provides for a few coming-at-you moments, as is a nice flight through the clouds that opens the movie. And although it looked good in stereo, the clouds themselves looked like they were rendered by an old Nintendo. The CGI is shockingly primitive, even for its time. But when present, it's usually in 3D, so it's not entirely unwelcome. Lightning bolts do come right at us, and rocks are exploded into a nice firework of shrapnel that always makes for a delightful 3D moment. Overall, the stereo they do film is usually pretty solid. This poolside dinner is actually a quite nice stereographic scene with these big candles and their flames somewhat popping out. If you look for it, you can notice some light glint off the water, which is only something you'll see in natively shot stereo. Earlier in the film, we do get a nice shot of Hercules examining the city through some roadside shrubbery. It's competently filmed in 3D. It's not broken in any way. We can be thankful that they didn't attempt a cheap 3D conversion, which were dreadful in 2009. And I suppose the only drawback is they don't really film anything interesting, which also describes the movie. Story-wise, the biggest problem with this movie is not that it's bad. The problem is it is not bad enough. It's bland. Most of the cast are competent, even famous actors, sleepwalking through a script that gives them little to do and nowhere to go. Spoiler alert, for some reason, they thought watching kids run laps would make for a thrilling and climactic conclusion. And watch them do laps we do, again and again. Mostly the same shot. It is in 3D. So there's that. We're only about halfway through. Hulk delivers the most atrocious acting, though, and it's the best thing the movie has to offer. His role is a legitimate supporting character, so if you're wading through this dreary swamp for some nostalgia time with the Hulkster, you'll find a few morsels to chew on. He gets a brief fight with a fellow wrestler, Paul White, or as some know him as Big Show, at about the 1 hour mark. You'd think with a couple of professional wrestlers in the house they'd manage to get this right, but no. Now, I'm hardly an expert at the art of wrestling, but I would describe this as sad. Perhaps the saddest on-camera battle ever filmed. Perhaps it might work as an arthritis commercial. I don't know. At least it's in 3D, if you can bear to watch. Hulk Hogan is the reason anyone would watch this, but the lead, little Hercules, was a child bodybuilder, Richard Sandrak, who would have been somewhat well known as a bit of an oddity at the time for being a bodybuilder before he could drive. He was often featured on talk shows and magazines. From what I've read, this movie was produced by his manager in the hopes of launching an acting career. That didn't happen, and he dropped out of show business soon after. When this movie came out, Hogan was still following in the footsteps of Ozzy Osbourne and doing a reality show with his family, all of whom make cameos throughout this movie. Perhaps their inclusion is why he agreed to do the film. And Hulk also followed Ozzy in death, making for a curious week of celebrity mourning, which is always an odd thing to be sad for someone you don't know or perhaps have never even met. And I think back to my parents watching a long and adoring tribute of some recently deceased celebrity person, and me as a kid muttering something sarcastic about it all, and was a bit surprised how angry I made them. I suppose I'm still unsure why these strangers should matter, but I now understand that they do. With myself, so far as I can tell, it's not that I confused them with friends or family, but the impact seems to be more so that they're part of a tapestry, the world as I've seen it, or perhaps saw it. And that although I always had some understanding that one day I would leave this world behind, I find myself a bit taken aback that it's actually the world that is leaving me behind. It's not just a reminder of mortality, it's a sense of belonging that fades away as these characters slip away and take their part of my tapestry with them. Now, although the Hulkster was probably on camera every week of his adult life, this sad little exercise was his final live-action film role. His actual last movie was actually also in 3D, providing a voice for an Elton John cartoon musical called Romeo and Juliet, which may make for a slightly more entertaining goodbye.
With the speed and the wind and the rain.
Look at this! Coming in!
I didn't know you played.
Ah, Miss Simmons. I don't anymore. When I was a student here, I had this jazz band.